listeners. So happy to have you here. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. What am I going to be speaking to you about today is guilt. So many of us live in this emotion, an emotion that I call absolutely wasted emotion for the simple reason that in most times it's actually giving the power to other people to manipulate us. Whenever someone realizes we are guilty towards them, we are only empowering them to manipulate us rather than owning our own power. So let's move or dive right into what is guilt and how to manage it and how to get rid of it at a level that it stops bothering you and stops making you feel like a bad person. Very important, right? All right, so let's begin with the two kinds of guilt that I have normally identified in my personal life. I call it the should guilt and the good guilt. And I'll tell you the difference. The should guilt is what society puts on us sometimes, and we start to own it as if it's ours. I'll give you an example. I live in a house where we are in a joint family. I live in a house where we are in a joint family where, everybody is a size zero. Everybody loves to gym, loves to work out, loves to eat healthy. And I'm not one in alignment with that. So I'm somebody who's a full Punjabi foodie, enjoys her, meals, all of that. So in the beginning when I came into this house, one of the things I started to feel very guilty about is that every time I would be eating, let's say, my french fries or the pizza, I would be looking at their faces and feeling so much guilt. But over the years, what I realized is that I don't need to be them. And you know what? That changed my entire thought process. I stopped feeling guilty for being 2 kilos or 3 kilos or 4 kilos more than what I should be as according to them. So, one of the things very important to understand is, where is your guilt coming from? If your guilt is something that you value, it's a very different energy than when the guilt is being put on you. So, very important to always introspect, is this guilt even mine, or is it a should of the world that is being put onto me? So, I'd love for you to start to explore. If you can make a list of all the things you're guilty about and look at, okay, is this mine, or is it the shame that I'm feeling that's making me feel guilty? For example, when I had started to work, right, in the beginning I used to always feel that, my mother-in-law, they were always there for their children, especially when these children came back from school. For example, if I came back from school, my mom was always there. When my husband came back from school, his mother used to have hot chapatis ready for him, to feed him with love and all of that. So for me, I used to feel a lot of guilt when I started working, that I'm not going to be there at that very crucial time when the children come home from school. Then I started to create a new story. What do I mean when I say this? So I started to ask myself, are there good mothers in the world who are not at home at that moment or at that point when children come back from school? And of course, the answer is absolutely yes. Are there good mothers in the world who are working women? And the answer was absolutely yes. And what are they doing differently from the women who are at home or full time mothers? And I started to examine, and over time, I remember creating this new story which said mothers who are actually at home take their children's time for granted, which means they are busy on the phone, busy on watching some serial, and maybe sometimes their children get more neglected than the working mother, because when the working mother comes home, she puts away everything because she's so guilty that she gives all of that time to her children. And you know what, when we create a new story, it helps us. I don't know what the truth is, and it doesn't matter, because in every segment there will be someone who's doing a fabulous job of that and someone who's not doing such a fabulous job. But where do we choose to put our focus on? So I made it more about that working women are, a role model to their children. They also teach their children how to respect their time, and there's so much more value. And you know what, they don't have to respect only the father but the mother along with that. And when you start when I started to repeat these kind of stories to myself, I saw all of my guilt leaving me. So I would love for you to start to examine your guilt and look at it. Where does this come from? Is this even true? A beautiful question to add to your guilt is this even true in the world? Is the opposite also true? Is it possible that someone could be the exact opposite and yet have it all? And most of the times you will figure out that when you start to look for evidence, it shows up. It's totally there, because there's no one way of doing anything, right? There are so many different ways. Having said that, I also believe in good guilt. What do I mean by that? Every emotion truly is feedback, right? So, because every emotion is feedback, you can look at your guilt and say, okay, what is it that I need to do more of in my life if I don't want to feel this? So, just bring that into your life. Like, sometimes what happens is I don't speak to my father for a week or 2 weeks. It can happen. So when on the first of every month, I love writing a list of who all am I feeling guilty towards, and then I cross out all the shoulds, but I keep everywhere where I feel like why this is important to me. Maybe over the month something has got ignored that is important to me. Can I bring it back into my life? And very quickly I create what I call the compensation package. So what is a compensation package? That so what if I was not able to be with you? So I don't move my guilt into regret. When you move your guilt into regret, then you can't do anything about it because you can't change the past. I like to move it into compensation. Okay, so this month I'm going to speak to my dad every Tuesday from 8:30 to 9:30. I'm going to fix an appointment with him so that we don't miss our weekly calls, which is something that both of us enjoy so much. And suddenly what was feeling like making me feel bad about who I am now has been brought back into my life, and now because of this action I will feel so much better about my life. So I'm using my guilt to create some sort of compensation. I think another thing around guilt that we must understand is boundaries. A lot of us feel guilty whenever we have to set boundaries, and what it does is that we don't realize that when we don't set boundaries, we move our guilt to becoming bitter and resentful. So, you don't want to feel bitter and resentful. I would rather you feel guilty towards these people and compensate. So, let me explain this. Let's say my mother in law calls me up for a kitty and says, Sweetheart, can you come up at 2 o'clock? I've kept a kitty at my place. And I say, No, mom, 2 o'clock, I have a session. I won't be able to come up, but can I send two salads instead? What have I just done? I have replaced that emotion of, instead of going like, oh my God, she called me, I'm not going to be able to be there. And you know what, mom, the minute I finish my session, I will also come up. Now I have compensated. A lot of people think, oh, compensation is like a bribe. We may be, teaching other people something wrong. Absolutely not. I want you to look at compensation as your convenience. What do I mean when I say this? When someone else makes us feel guilty about an expectation that they have, we are basically taking that expectation and replacing it with what we can do for them rather than letting them hold on to the expectation and not fulfilling it. Now, people who matter to us, people who we love, deserve that compensation, because you know what? So what if I couldn't go up for the kitty? There are so many other things I can do. And half of the time, do you know what lands up happening? People start to respect us because we set clear boundaries. So if you're someone who's struggling with boundary setting because you're scared of disappointing other people, I'm going to definitely pitch this into this whole guilt portion, that start to learn to disappoint other people, but definitely compensate with what you can give instead of worrying or feeling bad about what you can't give. So once we start to look at guilt in this holistic manner, that there is a should in guilt, there is a good guilt, we can compensate rather than saying yes to everybody, learning to saying no, setting boundaries. Have, even though after setting boundaries sometimes you may feel like, oh God, I've disappointed someone, you can continue to compensate so that you don't feel like, basically that you're managing their disappointment. All of this becomes possible when we start to look at guilt as something that is giving us information on the people that we care about, what we need to do, and the people that we don't care about, if we are feeling guilty towards, then you remember you are giving them too much power. So those are the people you need to reduce or remove from your life if they are making you feel guilty, even though you don't owe them anything. And of course, I'd love for you to, on the first of every month, ask yourself, who are the people I genuinely am feeling like I want to bring back more of them in my life? And then do things in that month to compensate. What will happen is, again, next month, somebody else would have got ignored, or, you may be guilty about, and then you can bring them back. Because a lot of us want to balance our lives. This work life balance concept is so heavy these days that everyone's looking for, how do I balance? I'm going to start to say, stop trying to balance, start to create harmony. What do I mean by harmony? If you've ever heard an orchestra, not all instruments play at the same time. And yet, you know what, instead of balance, look for the melody, the rhythm. The melody and the rhythm gets created because when all the instruments don't play at the same time, but each one, when it plays, gets what? It gets its own time with the listener. And I want same to happen with guilt. When you start to spend time with people and they get that one to one time with you because you were mildly guilty towards them, how beautiful your relationship will turn through that. So I'd love for all of us to stop looking for balance in every relationship and start to look for the melody, or rather the harmony, knowing that at the end of the month, guess what, those who had been neglected the previous month will get compensated, and those who have got neglected this month will get more of you the following month. That way, you know what, we are not carrying the baggage of regret, rather we are enjoying and made guilt into this beautiful game that we play, that we very easily release rather than carrying the burden in our heart. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I will see you next week, and do definitely deal with your guilt this week and let me know below what it is that you managed to solve in the process of listening. Bye. Ciao.